Welcome, everybody, to Aeon Byte, and welcome to that promo for the virtual Alexandria Academy. If you're watching on video, really the preeminent and only online course on Gnosticism and their brethren in the esoterica. My name is Miguel Connor, and I am your Pompatus of Gnosis. Welcome to this age of Hermes, this Philip K. Dick world, and these Gnostic times. And yes, I hope you're writing your own gospel and living your own myth. And we run with those searching for the truth and avoid those who have found it. And certainly living a magical life is a very important component to your waking up. So this certainly will be relevant to our topic today as we discuss Harry Potter and the deep symbolism. With us, we have the honor of being joined by Hans Andréa to discuss his book, The Alchemy of J.K. Rowling in the Light of the Alchemical Wedding of Christian Rosycross. Hans, thank you very much for coming on the show.
It's a great pleasure and an honor.
Honor is all ours, and pleasure too. And with us too, it's always a pleasure and an honor to be joined by Graham, as Vance is tied up with his Clark Kent identity today, doing the 9 to 5. So, Graham, how are you doing?
Doing wonderful, Miguel. I'm looking forward to hearing all about the alchemy behind Quidditch.
Indeed. And yes, good to see people in the chat. Hello, Christina. How are you? Always good to see you. Hello, Mr. Risen, and hello, everybody going into the chat. Mr. God knows, you always rock the Cosba. And as always, if you have any questions for Hans or want to complain about something about Graham or me, just please super chat them so we can separate you from the crowd and address your questions or issues. Other than that, not much else. House cleaning. There'll be a lot of news next week, as very excited to have Gary Lockman to discuss his new book and Chris Knowles to discuss his new book on synchromysticism. So stay tuned and stay awake. So, well, why don't we start with the beginning? And that would be your origin story, Hans. Tell us about yourself and how you came to write this book.
Well, I was born here in Haarlem in 1944. This is the place the Haarlem in the USA was named after. And like many people in those days, we decided to migrate to Australia. And so in 1956, we went off. And I did my secondary and tertiary education there. And I attended Teachers College, became a primary teacher for many years. And in 1988, I moved to New Zealand for a couple of years. And in 1990, I went back to the Netherlands because my mother was back here then and she had cancer. So I came to look after her. And I got a job and I stayed. And you ask about the Rosicrucians. While I was in Australia as a boy of about 15, I kept touch with my grandfather, who was a Rosicrucian of the Golden Rosycross here in Haarlem. And he noticed that I was a seeker, and so he put me in touch with the School of the Rosycross here, and I was really convinced by their teachings. My mother had hidden, see, my father was against the Rosicrucians. My mother had hidden a book called The Brotherhood of Shambhala all these years, and she gave it to me. And I vividly remember sitting in the sun, reading The Brotherhood of Shambhala. And it seemed as if together with the physical sun, there was a spiritual sun shining out of the pages. I was just so, I fell in love with the teachings of the school. And of course, the next question is, how did I come to write the book? Well, a friend lent me Harry Potter, and I thought to myself, oh, anything so popular can't have any depth, can't be any good. No. And so this happened to be part 2. And I tried to be polite, so I read the first page. I was in love with Harry Potter right from the start.
Wow.
The poor lad is, as you probably know, he's locked up in his room, and he isn't allowed to see his friends. And then his friends rescue him with a flying car and so on. And he took my heart. It was such a pathetic story. And I saw nothing Gnostic in it to start with. But then, towards the end, Harry kills the basilisk. Now, the school, the founder of the school has written a large number of books. And in one of them, he says that all these stories about people killing dragons, St. George and Siegfried and so on, it means they are neutralizing the Kundalini. Now, that may shock some of your listeners, but I'll explain that more later. I just want to point out for now that neutralizing the Kundalini is part of the Gnostic path as taught by the Rosicrucians. And so I quickly read all the other books. We were up to book 4 by then, and I saw more and more Gnostic symbolism. And when book 5, 6, and 7 came out, my suspicions were confirmed. In fact, before book 7 came out, I made a list of predictions of what would happen, and most of them came out. It was just incredible.
Very interesting, and thanks for sharing that.
I want to tell you why I actually wrote the book. It started off as a Yahoo group. Yahoo doesn't do groups anymore, but in the old days they did what are called groups. That means you send one email and it goes to everybody, you know.
Yeah,
And
I remember.
I sent all those out, and I did so because of the similarity between Van Reichenbor's writings and J.K. Rowling's writings. They also have the same initials, but it's just incredible the similarities I found. Now, just imagine, little story. Just imagine that you're visiting a house. It's one of these grand mansions with many stories, and it's crazily built. It's got stairs all over the place, and it's got a huge garden. And you go there quite often. You're familiar with it. And then, say, for example, you go to another country, say Indonesia, and you see an Indonesian-looking house, and you go into it, and you notice that everything is in the same place as the house you're in previously. The toilet's under the stairs, and there's 3 stories, and the balconies are exactly the same. And you go in the garden, and the pond is just the same size. It's, you know, to make a long story short, it's the same architect. It's the same architect has obviously built both houses. And that's what I'm saying, that the teachings of Jan van Reichenborg, the founder of the Golden Rosicrucians, his symbolism is also very strongly present in J.K. Rowling's books. And that's what I want to talk about today, just the incredible coincidences.
So you see them as coincidences, or, I mean, J.K. Rowling's obviously, she did a lot of research on alchemy, occultism, magic, all that. I mean, even Nicholas Flamel appears in the series. So she
Yes.
knows her stuff, or do you think it's something that might have been channeled?
No. When I say coincidence, I mean just exactly the same. I don't mean chance. I really mean deliberate.
Oh, okay. No, makes sense. And
The thing is, do you know the story of how J.K. Rowling got the story? Do you know that?
no, no, I'm afraid not. I mean, I guess, as we were talking,
Right.
we don't pick books. Books pick us. I remember in the late 90s, my son
Yeah.
was very young, you know, back when children actually read books, and he was interested in Harry Potter. So I read it and I thought it was good, but it didn't speak to me
Yeah.
like Philip K. Dick or George Herbert or Tolkien. So, and even my
Yeah.
I have 5 children, the other 3 are very young. And of course, they're very loyal to Harry Potter lore. this new generation of 8, 9, and 10-year-olds are very, you know what I mean? That's how powerful it is. But yeah, tell us the story, because I'm not that familiar with it.
Well, it was in June 1990, and J.K. Rowling tells us that she was on a train between Manchester and London. And by another strange coincidence, I was in England on holidays at the same time.
Wow.
But what happened was that this train had a delay. It stopped and nothing happened. All she saw out there was cows and so on. And suddenly she had this vision of a boy with a scar on his head. And she started asking herself, why am I seeing this? And she got the answers. This boy is on a train. He is going to his destiny in life. He is going to discover that he is a wizard and so on. And the whole 7 books came into her head in perhaps something like half an hour. And she says, and I quote, I looked in my bag to get a pencil and a book to write it all down, but I couldn't find it. And that's good because, quote, it would have broken the inspiration. So she was inspired. And I believe that she was inspired by, well, the same architect that gave von Reichenborg his symbolical teachings.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. What about you, Graham? Do you read Harry Potter?
I haven't read the whole series. I've read the first few. My introduction to it is after I had read Neil Gaiman and Books of Magic, where he introduced a character, Timothy Hunter, who was very similar to, could have become the greatest wizard or the greatest scientist, depending which path he chose. Had an owl for a companion, adopted family, glasses, and he came out several years before the first Harry Potter book came out. And when I was first introduced to Harry Potter, it was came across as a kind of derivative of that one. Rowling took things in a different direction. But one of the questions I had there is, any of the Rowling family, were they Rosicrucians or connected with that, or Freemasonry?
I really don't think so. I think she would have mentioned it. I think they're all members of the Church of Scotland. And as far as I know, Rowling says that she occasionally goes to church services of the Church of Scotland.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you for that. Shall we go down the line? Because again, what's interesting about Harry Potter is it seems like the occultism and symbolism, it wears it in its sleeve, if you would. But as you say, there is something deeper. I think you wanted to start with the 2 universes of Rosicrucianism, or where do you want to start, Hans?
Yes, that's right. I think it's important to explain the Gnostic beliefs of the Rosicrucians, and then I can proceed from there and see how this is done in Harry Potter. Well, of course, the idea of 2 universes is very Gnostic, and I'm sure everyone's familiar with that. And I want to just briefly go through this universe so that we can compare it to that other universe where the God above God lives, as you so beautifully call it. And so I want to start with looking at the size of this universe. And this is a question I love asking people. I'm talking about just the physical universe. If you were to count the number of galaxies in this universe, and you counted one every second, just have a guess. How long would it take you to count all the galaxies in the universe?
Infinity.
Just infinity.
Yeah,
well,
no idea.
They've worked out that it would take 6,500 years to count all the galaxies at 1 per second. That is incredible. When they were building the pyramids, you would start counting. You could go through the life of Jesus, through Napoleon, and today you would finally finish all the galaxies. And there could be more than that. And so, I want to emphasize that this universe is huge. It's unimaginably huge. And now, but the universe is also huge in the invisible planes. Of course, your listeners would know all about the etheric plane, the
Of
astral
course.
plane, the mental plane, and there are planes above that that I don't even name. And it's important to realize that in the astral planes of this universe, there are incredibly ecstatic planes of life. There are planes of life there that are totally beyond comprehension. They are so beautiful, they're so ecstatic, they're so joyous, and entities live there. And these entities have been able to escape the wheel of reincarnation and they can stay there. And of course, you have told your listeners quite often about the archons of the eons. And that's what I'm referring to. These archons, these entities who rule this universe, they live in a state of ecstasy, of bliss that is far beyond our wildest imagination. Now, what I want to say now is that beyond that, there is another universe still. And the problem is that we have no contact with it. This universe, this divine universe, is totally beyond our comprehension. We cannot write poems about it. We cannot describe it in music. We cannot write books about it. We have absolutely no contact with it. And I even say, and I hope this doesn't upset anyone, but our prayers do not reach that universe. And there is no way we can have any contact with it except for one thing. So why am I telling you this if we can't have any contact with it? Because in our heart, there is a small spark of that universe. We have within us, it's dormant, but through the process of alchemy, the idea is to bring life into that small spark and restore it to its glory. And then we can return to that divine universe. And in my two universes, I use an example with dimensions. So imagine a white screen with somebody projecting a film onto it. Now, of course, obviously, the people in the film are two-dimensional. So just imagine that you could make a film of yourself and project it onto the screen and talk to these people. Now, if you tried to explain what your life in the three-dimensional universe is like, they would have no idea what you're talking about. Everything we would tell them would have a different meaning. We say, well, my thickness is such and such, and they say thickness. Well, they would have to turn on their side to see this is how thick I am. There's no way they could ever understand what a three-dimensional universe is like. And it's the same with us. There is a four-dimensional universe, a divine universe, but we have no way of understanding it, except that when that four-dimensional spark in the heart begins to vibrate, then we feel a strange alienship. In the school of the Rosycross, we call it homesickness, because that spark originated in the four-dimensional universe. And our task is to bring that back to life. And that's alchemy. Alchemy is turning lead into gold. In other words, turning a three-dimensional human being into a four-dimensional human being. Now, I'm not actually saying there's an extra dimension, but this is a comparison that we can understand the difficulty in approaching the divine universe. So the purpose of alchemy is that we open our heart to the rays that are coming from the four-dimensional universe, and that's alchemy. Have you got any questions or comments so far?
No, I love what you said, and I agree. We even had Christopher McIntosh recently. He put out a book, Occult Germany. He says the same things you do. The Rosicross is very specific about the dormant God within each person and how we must work
Right.
to bring this sleeping God that nobody has seen, this, like you said, God above God, that humanity does not know and that it rests within each one of us, even in nature itself. So when you mean alchemy, Hans, you're talking about traditional alchemy or spiritual alchemy, or what are you talking about?
Right. Good question. Well, you see, it's the same as with Christianity. Most people don't know this, but original Christianity was Gnostic.
Mm-hmm.
The church and Constantine took the Gnostic teachings and nailed them to the calendar and said, Christ was born 400 years ago, and if you give yourself to Jesus, you'll be saved. And that's nonsense, because that is the original Gnostic teachings were symbolic. Jesus is the person that has to be born in our heart. And all the things in the Gospels and in Revelations are Gnostic ideas that have changed their explanation so that it all sounds three-dimensional. And it's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing with alchemy. Originally, alchemy was Gnostic. Alchemy was given to mankind to help him return to where he came from. This three-dimensional, four-dimensional spark in our heart came from that universe, and through a process we call the fall, the divine human beings descended into this three-dimensional universe and stayed there. And now, there's a saying: God never forsakes the works of his hands. He's always giving his children, his sons, the opportunity to come back. And that's alchemy. Alchemy is just one of the many symbolic stories of returning to the original universe, as the Christian Gospels and Buddhism and all the well-known scriptures, and that they're all about the same thing, because the eons don't have a gospel. The eons cannot make up a story, because their world is a lie. What the
Mm-hmm.
eons do is to change a truly Gnostic story into something that is interpreted in this three-dimensional way.
Beautifully
So,
said,
can
indeed.
I ask you?
Sure.
Can I
Sure.
ask you now to show a slide with the two columns
Sure. Let's get it
with the
on.
comparing the Alchemical Wedding and Harry Potter?
Yeah, it's right there.
Right, lovely, thanks. So, on the left, we see the Chemical Wedding. It was called Chemical it was published in English in 1690, translated by Foxcroft, and he called it Chemical. So you can see a whole list of things there that are the same in both stories. The Black King, Snape; Grey King, Lupin. Uh, Lupin has a young wife called Tonks. They all die, as they do in the Alchemical Wedding. Miguel, do you think perhaps I should just briefly recount the story of the Alchemical Wedding, or are
Yeah.
your
Yeah. Please
viewers
do. Real
familiar?
quick. Yeah.
Right.
Just for the audience. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just briefly go through the story. There's a chap called Christian Rosycross. He lives in a hermit's cottage on a hill, and suddenly an angel visits him, or a being with wings, and she gives him an invitation. And this is also very similar to Harry Potter. There's a storm outside, and Harry Potter also gets an invitation when there's a storm
Yeah.
outside. And of course, he gets this invitation from Hagrid. Anyway, um, Christian Rosycross reads the invitation, and he goes on a walk, on a journey, uh, to go to the castle where the Alchemical Wedding will take place. We're not actually told what the Alchemical Wedding is. He just wants to go there. On the way, he comes to a split in the road. He has to go one of four paths. And as you know, Harry Potter also has to make a decision about which of the 4 houses he goes into.
Right.
And in both cases, the decision is made for them. Because what Christian Rosicross does, he can't decide which of the 4 to take, so he takes out his bread and he sits down to eat and think about it. And there's a white dove flies towards him. So he throws some bread to the white dove, and all of a sudden a black raven comes towards towards them and tries to chase the dove away. And so Christian Rosicross is filled with indignation, as you can imagine. So he chases away the black raven and gives the bread to the white dove. And you can see there the symbolism there. You know, you have to chase away the black, chase away and protect the white. And this is exactly what Harry Potter does. He sits there in the Great Hall. He has to choose which house to go into. And he says, I don't want to go into Slytherin. He's rejecting the black. It's exactly the same.
Exactly.
It's just absolutely amazing. Just looking at the list there, I won't mention them all. We'll come back to them later. Of course, both stories take place in a castle. I've talked about the invitation in the storm. Christian Rosicross's story is 7 days. Harry Potter's story is 7 years. And I've got to finish the story of Christian Rosicross. He goes to the castle, and then he has to undergo a judgment, and that judgment is to be weighed against certain weights. It's one of these old-fashioned scales. You step on it, and if you come to the ground, you are too heavy. So Christian Rosicross passes the test with flying colors. In fact, 3 men try to pull him away. They jump on the other side of the scale, and they can't move him. He is absolutely 100% past the test. And then what happens then is, to cut a long story short, they go to a tower called the Tower of Olympus. Olympus is another word that occurs in Harry Potter, by the way. And this tower has 7 levels. And Van Reichenborch tells us that's the etheric level, the astral level, the mental level, and the 3 levels of the consciousness. And so Christian Rosicross and the other people that passed the test perform certain labors, which are too detailed to explain, but gradually, by using ropes and ladders, they climb up the tower. And in the end, they celebrate the wedding of the king and the queen. The king and the queen have died together with 2 other kings and 2 other queens. The 6 of them are mixed into a cauldron, and out of that mixture in the cauldron, there's a lot of alchemical processes takes place, and out of that cauldron, they create a king and a queen, and they are their marriage is the alchemical wedding itself. And Van Reichenborch tells us the king represents the spirit and the queen represents the soul. And that is what alchemy is all about. It is the marriage of the spirit and the soul. The spirit is the spirit of God, the spirit that lives in the divine universe. And the soul has to be reborn from that spark in the heart. And just to finish the story off, when the king and queen have come back to life, the funny thing happens. Christian Rosicross walks around the castle while everybody's asleep, and he comes into a sepulchre. And one of the servants says, "This is the sepulchre of Venus." Now, of course, I don't have to tell you what Venus symbolizes. No. And so he sees Venus sleeping on the bed. And okay, he shuts the door and forgets about it. But then suddenly the king has been told that someone has seen Venus. And he says to everyone, if you have seen Venus, I'm afraid we have to inflict a terrible punishment. You have to become gatekeeper. And suddenly the story ends. We don't know what happens then. All we know is that Christian Rosycross has to become gatekeeper. The story ends by saying there are 2 pages missing here, but the author has gone home. Has gone home. And the beautiful thing is that in Harry Potter, there's a very similar thing. Harry doesn't go into the room, but Dumbledore tells him that there is a room in the Ministry of Magic that is always locked, but it has in it a force that is stronger than anything you can imagine. And of course, both stories are talking about love. So that's the story of the Alchemical Wedding, more or less. And I'll just have a see if there's anything I need to add about on the list. I think that's. I think we've. The other things are minor. They're just small coincidences. The big ones are at the top. So I thought that perhaps if we go through the characters now, and see what they symbolize, and I want to start with Lily.
Is this the one you wanted?
Yes, exactly. That's right. Lily Potter, there she is, the divine spark in the heart. Yes. So a lily, of course, is a symbol of purity. But in the school of the Rosycross, we call it a rose, a white rose. And of course, that doesn't matter. It's the point is it's a pure white rose with potential. And that is the divine spark in the heart. When God created man in the divine universe, he laid down a plan of eternal development to make man greater and greater, and to move him from bliss to greater bliss, from glory to glory, and so on. And these things just can't be expressed into words, but the divine plan for the human being is absolutely perfect and totally beyond our comprehension, but it's pretty good. And so, but the thing is, this divine spark in the heart has to do something before it can be helped. And the husband is James Potter. And he is an animagus, as they call it. He can change himself into a stag. And this brings us to Psalm 42. Some of the Psalms are very, very Gnostic. Certainly, Psalm 42 says, as a hart, that is, as a stag, longs for the living water, so does my soul long for you, O God. And so I believe that J.K. Rowling has taken James Potter as the stag to symbolize that the divine spark in the heart has to start longing for God. And as you know, anytime, any kind of yearning, any type of longing is a desire, and so it's astral.
Right.
And so when that Lily Potter begins to open up, she issues a longing. And as I said before, God never forsakes the works of his hands. And so in this universe, there is a radiation from the four-dimensional universe. It's a radiation which we call the Father. It's got nothing to do with the church. It's nothing to do with religion. This is a radiation, a four-dimensional radiation coming from the universe of God. And what it does, it knocks on people's hearts. Through all the ages, to everybody's heart, it knocks and knocks. And it says, let me in. Now, most people are far too busy with their lives to even worry about it. They experience it as the pangs of conscience, because the conscience is our one link with God. That our conscience emanates from Lily. But if we can hear that voice that's been knocking on our hearts for thousands of years, then we open ourselves up to that radiation of the Father. And what happens then is that once we accept this, once we accept the fact that we don't belong in this world, that we need to go back to another universe, to a four-dimensional universe, when we realize that and we surrender to this longing within, then something incredible happens. There's another radiation starts to affect us. It comes into us through the medulla oblongata, and we call that radiation the sun. S-O-N. Now, the thing is, I just have to diverge slightly. As I said, God never forsakes the works of his hands. And so what he has done, when the human race fell down into the three-dimensional universe, what he did is set up a vibration field that is halfway between him and fallen humanity. And they call that, symbolically speaking, the sun. Another name for it is Christ. Another name for it is the Holy Grail, because it contains the blood of Christ. And Christ is not a person. Christ is a force field with divine power that is not as high in vibration as the divine universe, but it is higher than the vibrations in this universe. Is this clear? A sort of halfway
Yes.
house. Christ is halfway between man and God, symbolically. And so from Christ radiates a radiation called the sun. And that is when the alchemy begins, because that the sun radiation enters into the physical body. It enters the blood, it enters the head, and it changes our perception completely. This we begin to experience this world as a desert, and we begin to understand more and more clearly what to do. We understand what alchemy is, and the process continues. Imagine a fiery force entering the person in the heart. It enters the blood, it enters the endocrine glands, and then it goes into the spinal cord, which of course is, as most people know, is the tree of life in the human being. It enters the autonomic nervous system, and it goes down towards the bottom, towards the last plexus, the plexus sacralis, the sacral plexus. And so as it goes down, it affects the chakras. The chakras are energy centers that collect energy from this universe and make it for our use. There's spiritual chakras, and there's chakras that regulate things like sexual reproduction and just the normal household chores. But there's also the spiritual chakras. The higher up in the body we go, the more spiritual are the chakras, as I'm sure you're aware. And finally, when the light, or in actual fact, Harry, of course, we're talking about Harry. It's Lily's son, Harry. He finally enters the last chakra and the last plexus, the sacral plexus. And there he meets the Kundalini. So we're getting back to that. Now, what is the Kundalini? It is the root force that ties us to this universe. We cannot go back to God, to God's four-dimensional universe, until we have neutralized the Kundalini. And the Kundalini is a force like a coiled up snake. And it also contains our karma, all that karma we have built up in the thousands of years here on earth, that is all represented in the serpent of the Kundalini. So the job of the new soul that is born from Lily, its job is to kill the Kundalini. And there, at the same moment as it does so, that human being is forgiven all its karma. That's a biblical term, forgiven. But what happens is that the karma is cut off. It no longer has any influence. And that person who is in this process of alchemy has freed himself of his karma. And then the Harry Potter, or the new soul, or if you like Jesus, they go up the spinal column, and now this time the chakras are rotating in the opposite direction to what they were before. And this time the chakras absorb energy, or astral energy, from the four-dimensional universe. And finally, when that force has reached the top, it is ready to enter the Kundalini. The pineal gland. Mm-hmm. That's an unfortunate mistake. It's ready. It stands at the gate of the pineal gland. And what happens then is that the spirit itself, the divine spirit, God himself, enters the human being once again through the medulla oblongata. It shoots down into the spinal cord like a ray of lightning. It goes up it reaches the plexus sacralis. It goes up into the pineal gland, and then it opens up the pineal gland. At that moment, the universal divine consciousness is born, and the new soul becomes conscious. The old biological human consciousness is swallowed up. It dissolves into that cosmic consciousness. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, the human being with that new consciousness, he can see God. And I mean that in not literally, but in the sense that he can see the divine purpose. He is aware of the divine plan. And that vision of the divine plan is powerfully illustrated in the book of Revelations. Right at the beginning, the man says, "I am John," standing on Patmos, and he sees a human being standing in front of a seven-armed candlestick. And the human and that fiery human being talks about himself. "I am the son and the offspring of David. Mm-hmm. My name is Amen." And he says several things about himself. So this is original Christianity knew about this. And there, in fact, we have what we call alchemy in a very concise way. I've explained James. Harry is, as I said, the new soul. In the beginning, Harry's just a baby. And so when the new soul is born in us, it is just a very vague longing, a vague feeling that God has been born into us. But it's no consciousness. The human being, the biological human being, is still conscious. He has to do all the work. Harry is just unconscious. Now, I want to talk about Voldemort now. Where does Voldemort come into all this? Well, the thing is, when a human being decides to go this path of alchemy, this path of transmutation, then there is within him a huge mass of previous actions. I've already talked about karma. Of course, we all have a lot of karma, but within us, or within the microcosm, actually, within the microcosm around us, there is a vast force which ties us to this universe. It's all the interest we have in life, all our talents, all our phobias, our philias, everything that makes us a human being, that is inside a microcosm. That's logical, isn't it? Now, the thing is, when that divine force comes into our heart and moves into the blood and into the spinal cord, that the microcosm with its huge past sees that as a threat. Why? Because the new soul is going to destroy the whole biological human nature within us. And that's called Voldemort. And just as Pilate tried to kill Jesus, so Voldemort tries to kill Harry. Now, of course, it all sounds very dramatic and horrible, but of course, what happens is that in actual fact, there is a force within us which tries to resist that alchemical process. But as you know, Harry doesn't succeed in killing. Voldemort doesn't succeed in killing Harry. And this is what happens, that initially, as you go the path, a new soul is born in you, and that is an extremely joyous feeling. But then your whole past, your karma, and all the previous lives, they all get a deep shock, and they want to destroy that, and they do that mainly by making themselves feel very attractive. It's don't you love nature? Don't you? And especially the ego, of course. The ego says,
Right.
look, you're a wonderful person. You can't possibly go this path because this is going to kill you. This is and so this. But when the new soul is born, in fact, it drives the Voldemort power. It drives it to the outside of the microcosm, and there's so much light in the heart that it fills the microcosm with light. And this is where Voldemort is sent to Albania. Right when he tries to kill Harry, the spell rebounds, and he is made into a kind of fetus, an ugly little fetus, and he goes to Albania, and he comes back much later. Of course, he has to come back because in the process of alchemy, there has to be a final battle of the new soul against the old past. So, any questions about Voldemort or anything I've said?
No, so far it's great and very inspirational. Yeah, I think in your book, as I was reading it, you say Voldemort is similar to Lucifer or Mata, those who test. Mata
Yes,
tests the Buddha, Satan tests Jesus in the desert. In
exactly.
ancient times, it was not evil, it's just a natural part of the waking up process.
Well, in fact, that's an interesting point. From the Rosicrucian point of view, there is no evil in the world
Right.
because you can't define it. We call things evil because they oppose us, but it is simply a force that opposes the alchemist. We don't think of it as evil. We don't judge it. We say, well, sorry, but you have to go. And so the light obviously kills the darkness. It's very simple, really. Okay, I'll go on. Sirius is very important. Sirius, of course, is Harry's godfather, and I want to diverge again to give you some background. When the human microcosm was created, it was given 12 powerful faculties. I can't tell you what they were, but I refer you to the story of Briar Rose or Sleeping Beauty. You may remember that when Briar Rose was born, 12 fairies were invited and they all gave her magical gifts. And the 13th fairy wasn't invited, and she tried to kill Briar Rose, but she was prevented from doing so, and Briar Rose fell asleep for 100 years, which symbolizes just a very long time. And so, if you imagine the microcosm as a sphere, then there are 12 on the surface of this sphere. There are 12 stars, 12 constellations. So we're talking about a kind of zodiac within every human being. Just diverge again even more. There's a saying that God created man in his own image. Of course, people think, oh, well, I've got arms and legs, and so God must have arms and legs and a beard. Of course, when God created man in his own image, we're talking about the cosmos. The human being is created exactly the same way as a cosmos. And as you know, the cosmos has 12 signs of the zodiac. So man himself in his microcosm has 12 concentrations of power. And these 12 concentrations of power were given to man to carry out the divine plan. The divine plan is something we cannot conceive, but as I said before, it's to create, to bring man from a living soul, as the Bible calls it, to a life-giving spirit. This incredible plan can be carried out with those 12 stars. We call them stars because of the comparison with the cosmos, but of course they're not really stars. They're concentration of force within the microcosm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so the divine power came into the microcosm through these 12 portholes, if you like, 12 gates. The Revelation talks about the 12 gates of heaven, the pearly gates. You may know that expression, the pearly gates. And the Bible says the doors are studded with diamonds and rubies and emeralds and so on. And of course, that is to symbolize the tremendous power that these 12 doors, these 12 gates have. And so Revelation isn't talking about our future, that if you're a good Christian, you go to that place. No, we are the heaven described in the Bible. That is the human microcosm is heaven. So you might say, okay, but why don't I experience heaven? I'm subject to depression, and
Right.
my wife is leaving me, and I haven't got any money, and I'm not very happy. Well, the reason is that those 12 gates are shut. The divine forces, the divine food, the divine energy cannot enter our microcosm because our 12 doors are shut. Why are they shut? Because we descended from a 4-dimensional universe into a 3-dimensional universe. But we still have those 12 gates, but they are of a lower vibration. See, the human microcosm and the universe itself is in 7 planes. We call them the cosmic planes. There are 7 cosmic planes. We, at this moment, live in the 7th. And so in our microcosm, we live in the 7th part of our microcosm. We are supposed to be living in the 6th, but we descended into the 7th. So all this, the 12 gates of the 6th closed down, and now we have the 12 gates of the 7th. And these 12 gates within our microcosm are in touch with the zodiac. So our macrocosm, our big cosmos, has 12 stars, or constellations rather, and we have within us 12 constellations. And when we are born, the timing mechanism for our karma is determined. And of course, I'm talking about astrology here, just as an aside. Astrology is the science where you can work out the timing of your karma from the moment of your birth because of those 12 gates. Now, how does this relate to Sirius? Well, the thing is that when Lily begins to open, when Harry is born, one of the original divine 12 gates opens up ever so slightly. And a little bit of divine light begins to enter. Now, in the Bible, that little light is called the Star of Bethlehem. That is an incredibly powerful symbol when you think of what it means. When Jesus was born, the Star of Bethlehem appeared. It's nothing in the physical sky. It means that when Jesus is born in you, the Star of Bethlehem will appear. In other words, one of the 12 heavenly doors begins to open up and divine light comes into you. And when Harry is born, Sirius becomes his godfather. Of course, we know that Sirius is the largest star that we can see at night.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that one of the 12 gates is coming into the micro. You can imagine it in a symbolic way. A star, it shines on the heart. It becomes Harry's godfather, and so Harry has a guide. But what actually happens within the human being? Not only does one of the original stars, one of the original gates open, but this activates something that is related to the microcosm. And that is what we call the archetype. Every human being, every microcosm has attached to it an archetype. Now, the archetype is a mental plan for the development of the human being. Now, for us on Earth, the biological man, the archetype vibrates for a certain time 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, and so on. And then it goes out. When the archetype stops vibrating, the human being loses energy and dies. But of course, the divine archetype is immortal, it's eternal. Anything God creates is eternal. And so the archetype that is related to the microcosm is basically divine. And what happens is that it begins to vibrate. Okay, Sirius shines into the microcosm. It shines on Harry. At the same time, it revivifies what we call the archetype. And that is basically the divine plan for the development of the divine human being. Now, of course, you know that cells have to have genes. They have to have chromosomes to develop. And every plant has a little plan in the seed. We have a plan for, but that plan is related to our physical development. It says whether a male or female and how long our legs are and how our body functions and how we reproduce. But the divine archetype is in fact, if you like, the seed that makes the divine soul grow, and so you can imagine that a divine human being living in the four-dimensional universe has an archetype that constantly feeds him with energy, and it's a development that is totally beyond words. It is so ecstatic. So this is what Sirius is. Now, what happens is that this archetype, this divine archetype, begins to radiate through the person's heart and forms what is called a thought form. Now, just to explain what a thought form is, most of your listeners probably know that when you think, thought forms circulate around you. A thought isn't just a thing that dies and disappears. When you think about something very strongly, a thought form is generated within your microcosm, in your aura. It floats around you.
Right.
And this is why you can be obsessed with certain thoughts. They're living things. But it's the same with that divine archetype. It shines into the person's heart, and the person forms a thought form. But this time, it doesn't circulate; it stays in front of the person, and that is Sirius. That is, there are other authors who have explained this, and there's a chap called Gustav Meyrink, who's written a book called The Angel of the West Window and The White Dominican. He has written very, very Gnostic novels, and Gustav Meyrink calls this image the image with the dead eyes, with the idea that as long as Harry is unconscious, as long as Harry is just circulating within the body without the new consciousness, this thought form is has its eyes shut. It isn't conscious. As soon as that new consciousness is born, this thought form comes to life, and it takes in Voldemort's place. Voldemort is killed. Sirius takes its place. Because you see, when a microcosm is created, it consists of a higher self and a lower self. The lower self is the personality. The higher self is a power field around that personality. As I say, it has 12 force centers around it and has a tremendous force field within itself that guides that person and helps him to carry out God's plan. Because a person living in the divine universe knows God's plan. How are we going so far before I do the next one? And, is this getting too abstract?
No, it's great. What do you think, Graham?
No, I think it's fascinating. I'm very much enjoying it.
Yeah, I think you're clear and
Okay.
concise for sure.
Well, this, as I said before, the funny thing is that everything I'm telling you is what Van Reichenborg has told us. So I'm not no great scholar. I have read the books of Van Reichenborg just so many times, and what I'm telling you is in his books, and I can see it symbolically in Harry Potter, and I can see it explicitly explained in Van Reichenborg's book. For example, what I've just told you is in The Coming New Man. And in the back of my book, I've forgotten the page numbers. Anyway, in the back of the book, there's a list of books written by Van Reichenborg, and it actually ties Van Reichenborg's writings to the symbolism in Harry Potter. So if people want to know, my noble assistant has found it. Page 226, 227, and 228 has got a list of the books and the ISBN numbers and everything. And for example, Sirius, I've just seen Sirius here, chapter 25 and 26 of my book. There's The Coming New Man, chapter 4 and chapter 8. So it is beautifully tied together with the Rosicrucian teachings. It's just incredibly wonderful. Anyway, I'll go on to the next person. Let's talk about Hermione. Very, very important person. Now, once, to digress again, once a person has that new consciousness, that is the end of transmutation. The person has become an alchemist. But that's only the beginning. We have only really talked about the birth of the new soul, the growth and the maturity of the new soul. But a whole new divine human being has to be built up. And that process we call transfiguration. And the word transfiguration says it all. It means that the mortal earthly personality is replaced by a divine human being, a child of God, with all the divine faculties. And we have, they are called self-initiations, and they have names that linked to the planets. So the first initiation is called Mercury. And Mercury, of course, is the messenger of the gods. So symbolically, that means that when you undergo the Mercury initiation, you have the messenger of gods. In other words, again, you understand what God wants you to do, because the divine spirit enters you. The soul is married to the spirit in the alchemical marriage, and the personality carries out the divine plan. Now, after the Mercury initiation comes the Venus initiation. And when the master alchemist is ready for the Venus initiation, as I say, they're self-initiated. There's no master that gives these selves. This is a matter of being mature to receive these new gifts. And so the next gift is Venus. A Venus, when a person has Venus, and we're getting back to what I said before, the alchemical wedding, the sepulchre of Venus. When Venus wakes up, if you like, she endows the person concerned with divine love, and that's nothing to do with what we biological human beings call love. I'm talking about a fiery force that is totally impartial. It radiates onto everyone. It is unconditional, and it helps people to understand what their purpose in life is. And I could probably talk half an hour about love, but you understand that it is a love that you receive from God and that you radiate to fulfill out his plan. And let me tell you that to receive love from God and to give it to people is the most intensely ecstatic, blissful experience that you can have. And the we can think of all the wonderful things that our planet can provide us, especially in summer. And we talk about wonderful food, and we could talk about charity and all sorts of things, but there is absolutely nothing that can compare to when divine love flows through you and goes to other people. It's just such an ecstatic and rapturous experience that no words can express it. Um, and
Agreed.
after that comes Mars, the Mars initiation. The Mars initiation is endows the candidate with a new will. And I'm talking about the divine will. So that means that if you decide that something must be done, then it happens. The will is an executor. It carries out the divine plan. If for example, if you were on Earth and you had this gift and you said you will be healed, then that person would straight away be healed. It sounds quite miraculous to us, but of course, the whole idea of the divine plan is not that God goes around in the universe doing things. No, God is a spirit, a sevenfold spirit with 7 levels of radiation, and he does what he wants, not by doing it himself, but through the microcosms that he's created. He lives in these microcosms. The microcosms, their purpose is to carry out the divine plan. That's what human beings are. They basically God's children that do what he wants. God does nothing himself. God creates the universe. God creates microcosms and cosmoi and so on. But those microcosms are his tools. They do the divine plan, and in reward for that, they have this total, unimaginable bliss for doing God's will. There's absolutely nothing that can surpass the joy of doing God's will. I'm not talking about a mental joy. Oh, that's nice, No, I'm talking about an experience, a spiritual experience that you can feel intensely and powerfully, and that creates such incredible happiness that you look. I can't explain to a blind man what a painting looks like. I can't explain to a deaf man what Beethoven sounds like, and I can't explain to people who haven't got this what it's like to feel God shining through your heart. It's just impossible to explain. Anyway, back to Hermione. Now, as I said, the first initiation is called the Mercury initiation. Now, can you see a tie between Mercury and Hermione?
I do, yeah.
See, Hermione is the female form of Hermes. Hermes is a Greek god. The equivalent was Mercury, the Roman god. So
hmm
J.K. Rowling has hidden Mercury in Hermione's name. And so Hermione is the mind of the alchemist. Harry is the heart. Harry's the new soul. Hermione, and when I was talking to you earlier on, I said that you begin to, your mentality changes. You begin to understand what you're meant to do. And this world becomes like a desert. You actually begin to experience it as a three-dimensional person would experience a two-dimensional universe if we were locked up into it. So, you get this restricted, you're in a prison. And Hermione is the mental faculty that helps you carry out the transmutation. And if you read Harry Potter carefully, she's always advising Harry. She's always giving him knowledge, and she says, "Don't you listen? They've told us this 5 times." and so she's a lovely person, but her symbolism is just so wonderful that she explains to the alchemist what he has to do. Of course, it's always Harry that does. She doesn't do anything. When something important has to be done in the story, it's always Harry. Okay, and of course we can't talk about Harry and Hermione without mentioning the third person in the trio, and that's Ron.
Of course.
Now, Ron's full name is Ronald Bilious Weasley. Now, what do you think of when you hear the word bilious, Miguel?
Bile?
Exactly. And what organ produces bile?
Liver?
Exactly. The liver. Live. See the word live in there?
Right.
In Rosicrucian alchemy, we believe that the biological personality is seated in the what we call the spleen liver system.
Mm-hmm.
So Ron is the biological personality, and he is, in fact, if I look upon these 3 children as priests of a sanctuary. So Harry is the priest of the sanctuary of the heart. Hermione is the priestess of the head sanctuary, and Ron is the priest of the abdominal sanctuary. And so we have the 3 parts of the human being participating in this. And now I think it's time to get on to the Weasleys. Can we see that slide with the chakras and the Weasleys? It's slide number 1.
This one. Is it
No,
this
that's
one?
not it. No, it's a chart with lines all over the place. That's it. Yes.
Okay.
Now, people have said to me, yes, but the Weasley family, there is 9 of them, but there's only 7 chakras. Well, the thing is that I've discovered that the Weasley family symbolizes the glands, that is the ductless glands, the endocrine glands, the chakras, and the plexuses. And so there we are in front of us. They're in the order of age. So Ginny is the youngest, she's at the bottom. Ron is the second one. And I've mentioned the spleen already because Ron is in the spleen liver system. And of course, Fred and George are twins. So this accounts for one extra person because the adrenal glands, there's 2 of them.
Right.
We have 2 kidneys, and each kidney has renal means kidney, right? So adrenal, it means sitting on top of the kidneys. And that's Fred and George. And Percy is the heart. Percy, of course, is short for Percival, which ties in with Parzival, the Knight of the Holy Grail. And he's the heart. So I'll get onto that later. Charlie is the throat. And then Arthur and Molly. Now, how is it possible for 2 people to symbolize one gland? Well, the thing is, the pituitary gland is the master gland. So that makes them the head of the family. The pituitary gland regulates the glands from the other glands. But the pituitary gland has 2 parts. It's got a posterior gland, and what's the opposite of posterior? Anterior, that's right. There's an anterior part and a posterior part to the pituitary gland. And so this is where we get 9 people fitting into 7 items there.
Right.
I won't explain all those plexuses, but they are in the autonomic nervous system, and when the Gnostic power that emanates from Harry, that emanates from the heart, it enters that and it changes those plexuses so that their performance changes. And I know one vivid one is the cervical plexus. What happens there is that it starts, when you go the path, it starts to close off the forces that come into us from the atmosphere around us. We breathe in, and in the air there are also astral and etheric substances. Now the cervical or the throat, it shuts off the forces from this world. And this is why we begin to see the world as a desert. And of course, this brings us onto the pair in the Bible, Jesus and John, his cousin. John lives in the desert. Why? Well, we don't see these things historically. We don't see Jesus as a historical person, and we don't see John as a historical person. John is the symbol of the person going the path. He says, after me comes one that is greater than I. I must decrease and he must increase. And this is exactly what happens in the pupil. When these plexuses begin to operate because of the Gnostic force in their heart, they begin to influence the person's whole body, his whole life. Everything he does is beginning to change. And so when we talk about the cardiac plexus, there's Percy, Parsifal, that ties us with the Grail. Percy symbolizes the quest for the Holy Grail, because the Grail isn't a cup, a historical cup that was held up to receive the blood from Jesus' body. No, Percy is building the Grail within the heart. It's this cardiac plexus that is the Holy Grail, or at least it's holy once we have cleaned it. Everybody has a cup there, but whether it's holy is another matter. But the whole idea of going the path of transmutation is to cleanse and purify the heart. And so, in other words, all earthly desires must be got rid of. All carnal desires, all desires for the ego, they've got to be thrown out. And the Holy Grail has to be in a crystal clear cup that can receive the blood of Christ. And I've explained what the blood of Christ is. That is the force that exists in the atmosphere halfway between heaven and earth, so to speak. Christ gives us his blood when we have totally purified our heart. And that's a big job, I can tell you that. But it's in a sense, it's easy, because if we surrender to Harry, if we let that longing for God speak, and we listen to our conscience, we listen to what our heart tells us, and we ignore that those earthly impulses, then we can do it. And it is a lovely little thing about Percy too. Another way of talking about the Grail is to call it the Crystal Lake. It's a different set of symbolism, but I think it's mainly the Freemasons that are concerned with this. There's called a Crystal Lake. It's a lake that has to have absolutely pure water in it, which is just another symbol for the same thing. But you know who Percy's girlfriend was?
No.
Her name was Clearwater. Penelope Clearwater. See, that's incredible, isn't it? It always ties up. It's just so amazing. And so that's Percy or Parsifal. We've got Fred and George. They regulate the energy. So you spend your energy on transmutation and not on pursuing earthly things and so on. And Ron is the spleen, and I've already said that bilious relates to the liver, and we call that the spleen liver system. And it's I couldn't believe myself in the beginning when I thought Ron symbolized the earthly personality living in the abdomen. That's a physical thing. At the same time, he's a symbol for the spleen liver system. Like a cross, it works both ways. It's just incredible.
Yeah, fascinating.
And yeah, and of course Ginny, the root chakra, and when Harry Potter goes down into the central nervous into the spinal cord, he goes down, and Ginny's unconscious, and so the root chakra has stopped turning. It's not taking in any of the forces that apply to that, and she wakes up. That symbolizes the idea that the chakras is now turning in the other way, and of course Harry goes up the pipe and the pipe, and then all the other chakras turn the other way. And when they turn in the way I'm not sure whether you call it clockwise. It depends on whether you're standing in front of the person or behind him. But seen from within, the clockwise motion of the chakras is the earthly forces entering the microcosm. When they turn the other way, they take in the forces from the God, from the divine universe, from the God order, from the sixth cosmic plane. All right. Now stop for a minute just to.
Yeah. We are we're soon going to be at an hour and a half, so we should probably wrap it up. Yeah.
Goodness.
It's been a
ranting
very
and raving.
no, but it's been hypnotizing and wonderful. There is a super chat from the amazing Christina Marie, and she wants to ask you, Hans, do you recommend a translation edition of The Alchemical Wedding? Can't wait to read it.
Okay.
And she's going to read your book too. She can't wait either.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Well, on page 228, the Alchemical Wedding is listed, and it's an explanation by Jan van Rijkenborg containing the chemical wedding. You see, I don't know if it's possible to buy the Chemical Wedding on its own anywhere. I don't think there's a single publication, but as I say, Jan van Rijkenborg has written a detailed explanation of the whole Alchemical Wedding, and that's listed on page 228. It's called The Alchemical Wedding of Christian Rosycross, and it can be ordered on Amazon.
Right.
Does that answer
Definitely check out. Yeah, I think so. Let's see if she has a follow-up. But yeah, no, for the audience, read his book. He's got many more charts, the legends, everything. It's an amazing read. What about you, Graham? Any comments or questions? Yeah, Christina Marie, she's happy. She says thank you for the answer, Hans. And
by the way,
Graham,
it's important to know that my whole book is online, so you can read it for nothing. And my website is harrypotterforseekers.com, and on the opening page there is a banner talking about my book, and if you click on the banner, you get a whole lot of options of buying it, but you can get a free copy. You can read the PDF online, or you can download it. And if you go to my website, within about 3 minutes you'll be able to see that page 228 and see where it is and so on.
Wonderful. That's incredible. Yeah, check it out. And of course, I already have it on the show notes, so you can get it on the show notes when I put it the audio version and on other platforms. It will be on the show notes, so you can check it out. Yeah, it's a good read, and certainly expanded my mind, especially relating it to Rosicrucianism and alchemy. Well, back to you, Graham. What do you think as we wrap things up?
I was going to say I need to take a look at his book because he's got so much here that I could listen for another hour and a half. One question One question I had is, what about the significance of the color green in Harry Potter? His color, his eye color, his mother's eye color, and any parallels between that and like the Grail.
Great question. As a matter of fact, there's a lovely little story called The Divine Comedy by Dante. You've probably heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, do you know that Beatrice has green eyes? She has emerald green eyes, and I think that's what J.K. Rowling is referring to. Green is the color of hope, and in the Bible, Paul talks about faith, hope, and love. So hope is a very, very important aspect of alchemy. I'll tell you what, as a present, how would you just like me to finish by talking about Peter Pettigrew?
Yeah, please do.
Would you like that?
Yes.
Right. Well, Peter Pettigrew is a wizard who can change into a rat. Now, of course, when you call a person a dirty rat, you're not paying them a compliment, because
No.
the rat is an animal that can survive under nearly all circumstances. If everybody dies in a nuclear disaster, who survives? The rats. So the rat is a symbol for the force within us that helps us survive. So we all have a Peter Pettigrew, and of course in the story he's called Scabbers. When he's a rat, he's called Scabbers, and you see the word scab. In Australia, it's not a very compliment to call someone a scab. It's a strike breaker, for example.
Right.
And so there's a whole chapter about this survival mechanism in The Coming New Man of Jan van Rijkenborg, but it is basically what we call the ego. I want to be careful, because what the theosophists call the ego and what the anthroposophists call the ego is something different. We when we're talking about ego, we're talking about the force that lives in the solar plexus that helps us to survive, and it's always talking to us. The divine spark is in us, is always whispering and speaking in a very quiet voice, and so often we don't hear it. But the rat in us is always screaming at us, yelling at the top of its voice. It's warning us about that. Of course, it's nothing wrong with that, because we, as biological human beings, we have to survive in this world. There's danger around us. But it just goes too far, because every time we go into the supermarket and someone puts the trolley in front of us and we can't get through, Peter Pettigrew starts screaming. And when we're driving around, people doing dangerous things, there's the rat in us making us pay nasty compliments to the other drivers. And so I could tell 100 stories about Peter Pettigrew.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Yeah, this has been wonderful for the audience. For subs on Patreon or Red Circle or AB Prime, I'm also going to include in the audio version an old interview I did with Derek Murphy on his book, Jesus Christ, Harry Potter, where he puts Jesus and Harry from. So you'll get that bonus too.
I've got his book.
Great. Yeah, good book. Very
And
interesting.
I've had Facebook contact with him.
Yeah, he's a great artist, a man of many skills. So if you're listening on as a sub, you will be getting after this our interview with Derek, and it will really expand, give you more ideas on the mythology of Harry. But yeah, we better wrap it up. First of all, I'll say, Graham, thanks for keeping us company and keeping everything tidy and moving forward.
Always my pleasure. Always great to have a chance, and it was a pleasure to meet Hans.
It is indeed, and for the audience, thank you Thank you very much for those who are here live. And Hans, really enjoyed the interview, and good luck with your book and all the other things that you're doing to make it a more magical world.
Okay, lovely. It's been wonderful to talk to you and share this with you.
Oh, we really enjoyed it. And for everybody else, yes, happy solstice, happy summer solstice.
Yeah,
Yeah, may
I
Artemis
think
be
there's
with
something.
you as she reigns.
I think it's significant that it's solstice.
Yeah, no coincidence in this world. So yeah,
That's
enjoy
right.
the summer, everybody. Enjoy the Son of God, and as always, thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, and we will talk soon. Take care, everybody.